Hello and welcome to Azur Lane Meta. Today we're going to be discussing the impact that plus 13 equips can mean for the best in slot equipments. Welcome back to Azur Lane Meta. If you guys have seen my latest video, it is about all the new changes that come with Operation Siren. Of course, these are just kind of leaks from the Chinese beta server, so we don't know exactly how they'll be implemented here in English. They have not even been announced yet. But one of the things that they talked about is having plus 13 gold and rainbow equips, plus 11 purple equips, and plus 7 blue equips. This is a big change, and some of you wanted to know what this could mean for best in slot equipments, what the meta is for equipments. So today we're going to talk about what that means in general, and then we're going to briefly go over the new equipment. We don't know all the new equipment. We only know really what came from the Royal Navy side, because that's kind of what Area 1 is about, and presumably all the other factions will get a boatload of new equipment as well that will be changing the metagame. So we won't discuss too long about that, but we will talk in general about what changes plus 13 for golds mean to how we equip our ships. One of the unique things about Azur Lane, if you are new, is unlike other gacha games, where the higher rarity equipments are always better, in Azur Lane up until this point, there are many instances where purple equips are better than gold equips, and gold equips are better than rainbow equips in certain instances. And that is kind of because purple, gold, and rainbow equips up until this point have all had a cap at being plus 10 enhanced. And enhancements in Azur Lane increase the base damage for weapons. For auxiliary equipments, they increase the stats that they give. This is probably the most important things that your equipments give for their respective roles. And by having them both be comparable at the same level at plus 10, it means there's not too much differences, and that means if there's a specific equipment that plays a special role, then that equipment might be best in slot. There are plenty of examples. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we're going to go through some of the major ones. So for example, the 406mm MK6 is and has been one of the best battleship guns there have been. It had the highest damage per second for a while in the game, and even today, after we've seen a lot of power creep from the PR weapons, it is still the best battleship gun for a 3-shot battleship that needs high explosive ammunition. And that's pretty impressive given that there are URs and gold equipment PRs, that this basic gun is still relevant. It's not necessarily the best anymore, but is actually very common to see because of its prevalence. Other examples where if you watch any other guides here on YouTube or any of my other videos, when I talk about equipping for the dive bomber slot, we all talk about the Hell Diver. The Hell Diver is once again a purple equipment. And why is this plane so much better than all of the other dive bombers? Well, it is the only dive bomber that has a 2,000-pound bomb and 2 500-pound bombs. These bombs, basically, between the combination of their damage and their modifiers that they inflict, are going to be dealing the most kind of damage on average. So even though you are losing out on your potential 20 aviation stat, you get a higher damage. And because you are plus 10 on the Helldiver or plus 10 on the BTD, your base is going to be kind of, you're sitting at the same sort of level. And so you still typically want the Helldiver in most situations. Other examples and auxiliaries are a little bit easier to kind of go across this trend because there are a lot of unique auxiliaries that don't exist in the gold levels. The repair toolkits, even though it has 50 less HP than the standard event exclusive HP items, gives you the skill to heal, which more or less makes up for that in most circumstances. The aviation gasoline gives up some aviation from the steam catapult, but you're getting a very relevant skill in something like PvP or anything that does crash damage. And the homing beacon, of course, giving up aviation for its also special skill of reduced cooldown. So we have a lot of instances where purple equips are actually better than their gold counterparts. How does that play out once we move to plus 13? So when we do the math, basically the skills all stay the same, everything stays the same, but we are increasing our base damage or some of the stats. When we find out from a plus 10 purple equip to a plus 11 purple equip, that's about a 9%, maybe 10% increase in whatever stat or damage that we're looking at. When we go with a gold equipment, or a UR equipment, a rainbow equipment, and we're bringing up to plus 13, that's about a 30 to 32% chance increase. This means we're no longer comparing apples to apples. Gold equipments are going to be at a just straight higher level than your purple equipments because you now can equip them to plus 13. So obviously, if we're talking about plus 11 versus plus 11, the meta would stay exactly the same. But because we're talking about plus 13 versus plus 11, now we are going to shift the meta towards higher rarity equipments. Your gold and your rainbow equipments are going to be more relevant. So let's take an example of our two biggest cases, and that's going to be the 406mm MK6. How does this compare, and is it still best in slot for those that want to use high explosive ammunition? The short answer is, after we get this update, whenever it does end up coming, it will no longer be best in slot for that role. The triple 381mm, which is the MK3 prototype gun for HE, is now actually going to out damage it. This is now going to be your new choice in preference when you're comparing this at plus 13 to the MK6 at plus 11. So we are changing that. It is kind of going to be a dead gun. So if you are preparing for this, you're going to want to get your hands on some triple 381mm MK3 prototype. That is really going to be the next gun for HE ships that have 3 shots. So stack up on those. Now let's look at the Helldiver. The BTD has always been considered the second best dive bomber up into this point. It has some usages, but the Helldiver is just easier to show a bunch of new players. Just put this on and it will be better in 95% of circumstances. Will that still be the case? Obviously, once again, the Helldiver is going to lose some ground on the BTD, as the BTD is going to increase up to plus 13. So when we do the math, they become very similar, but the BTD still loses out to the Helldiver just barely. So you are still going to be using the Helldiver over the BTD. Now this assumes that we aren't getting any new dive bombers that outperform the Helldiver. I would be shocked if they don't add a gold dive bomber that has a 2,000-pound bomb and 2 500-pound bombs in the near future. But I don't know that. We don't know that. Right now, all we can compare is what we have. And the Helldiver still wins. That's how far ahead it was of every other plane. Now, the BTD can compete. You're not going to see much of a difference between the two, but the Helldiver is still slightly better in most circumstances. So we're going to go take a look at the new equipment. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there are going to be more equipment than this. We don't have it all released. This is basically just the Royal Navy side. We're going to briefly talk about what it is. So this is the calculations that they've come up with for their damage per second. And so if we look at the new cruiser gun, it seems barely better than the triple 203mm 1934 prototype that we already have for HE. There's not really a significant difference. I think the DPS is technically a little bit better because it's faster, but the damage is obviously lower. So there's not too much of a difference there. In terms of the airplanes, none of the airplanes are really going to beat out the event airplane that we just got, and also we are going to be able to craft that with the airplanes that we can build from Operation Siren. So that really doesn't change. The new torpedoes look like they're going to be solid. You're going to try and use them if you can. And yeah, but not too much here. Like I said, I don't want to go too much in here because there are probably going to be 4 times as much of equipment released here, and they're probably going to continue to update it. But anyway, the short answer is plus 13s for gold and URs, or gold and rainbow equipment, mean that they are now going to be almost always your best in slot, rather than having a little bit more comparison of, what damage does this purple one do. So it should be easier for new players to understand what the best equipment is, and so that's kind of interesting. It also means we're going to be doing a lot more grinding, and if you saw in the thumbnail, there is going to be the ability to build the rainbow torpedoes. Those are the highest damage torpedoes that they have, and when you mix those with the black auxiliary torpedo, that is going to be best in slot. So that's going to be interesting. So that's all I have for you today. Just briefly talking about, what does plus 13 mean for our best in slot equipments.